Hey everybody, welcome back to the Benchwarmers, your bi-weekly look at the world of Jews and sports. Gabe, how you doing, buddy? Is
Hey, folks.
that your Mark Maron?
Hey, folks.
Am I the-
Stamps.com. Stamps.com. We're not a Stamps.com podcast. I'm doing great. How are you?
Quite the way to welcome in new guests with your off-brand Mark Maron impression. Really steering into the podcasting stereotypes.
I was about to say, I think if you host a podcast, you have to have a Mark Maron impression or a Joe Rogan impression. But I don't know if I've ever actually listened to a moment of Joe Rogan to know what his podcast sounds like.
I've watched news radio, so I have an idea of what he sounded like 25 years ago.
Is the podcast an extension of his news radio character?
As far as I know, yes, because in news radio he played a moron. So I think, from what I understand, that is also his podcast personality.
Oh wow! Well, we got one heck of a show, a 3-ring circus of a show tonight.
Oh, that's great, and a great way to introduce our guest for the evening. Sports writer Jeff Pearlman, the author of a number of books. I think 7 is the number. Many bestsellers.
I think he said 9. I think it was 9.
Unbelievable. He wrote a book called Showtime about the Showtime Lakers that has been turned into a television show that's going to be debuting this coming Sunday. We're talking on a Monday night, but on Sunday, March 6th, it's going to be debuting on HBO. And we talked to him about that, how the TV show got made, his involvement in it, and everything like that.
So it'll be on HBO, HBO Max, and Crave for those in Canada.
Oh, that's good to know. I do get Crave. I don't get HBO Max. But yeah, we talked to Jeff about his career, about his bar mitzvah. We talked about his famous interview with Atlanta Braves closer John Rocker that became very famous because Rocker said a bunch of homophobic and racist things about pitching in New York City.
He threw some real racism in there.
Yeah. So it's really interesting to get his perspective on that. He's had a really impressive career as a sports writer, both for magazines and for his own writing that has been turned into books. So really great to be joined by him and prescient, good timing too, because this TV show is coming out soon.
One thing we didn't get to, unfortunately, in the interview, which I would have loved to talk about amongst all of this, is his new book, which we'll talk about at the end of the show, to throw it on in there because he's got a new one coming out as well. But thanks so much to Jeff for being on the show with us. And we're excited for all of you to hear the chat. But in the meantime, James, what's happening this week in sports?
Well, I think I saw a great tweet that said something to the effect of, February 2022 is the worst month ever for not wanting your politics in your sports, not wanting a collision. And so, it's February 28th. The war in Ukraine is ongoing. There's peace talks right now, which we'll talk about in a sec. Not the thing we're going to focus on. I mean, we're a sports podcast, but
we have a special edition episode focusing exclusively on the Russia-Ukraine conflict.
It is affecting, sports around the world and Jewish athletes and sports people in different ways. And it's something we gotta mention at least a little bit.
I'd also like, before we get into it, really, I'd also like to bring up that I think it was about 18 months ago, I sent an email to our producer, Mike, saying, hey, Mike, I think we should get this Vladimir Zelensky on the show. He's Jewish. I think he would be a good guest. Presumably he's into soccer.
It would have been a good one. Now he's probably a little bit harder to get, maybe probably for the foreseeable future. But a few Jewish stories to talk about in relation to that. The first one, I think, is pretty big news, is that the owner of the Chelsea Football Club, Roman Abramovich, who's one of the famed oligarchs who's always talked about as sort of wielding all the wealth and control in Russia, has had to relinquish control of Chelsea.
And did he do this voluntarily, or was it sort of, thrust upon him?
It's hard to exactly say. It seems like it might have been taken away from him if he didn't give it up. And to be clear, he hasn't ceded ownership of the club. I mean, his ownership is worth, I don't know, $4 billion. Like it's a hugely valuable property, but he's given up control. He ceded stewardship of it to sort of board of trustees type group. And it'll be interesting to monitor that. He is involved in a lot of sports, both in Russia and the UK, and I think in Israel as well. I'm not sure if he has any actual ownership of any team in Israel, but it's an interesting story because there's not that many cases we know where owners are forced out. There's like the Donald Sterling type deals, but it's rare that someone is forced out just because of geopolitical reasons, let's say.
Reasons that aren't necessarily part of them. I think presumably it is also something that Abramovich, he's a very close confidant of Putin's, and hasn't yet spoken out against the military action and the occupation.
Right.
But I think, it's, he's a commodities and oil and gas trader that, like we said, is very, very close to the leader. So presumably he's not necessarily involved in this action, but is sort of part of the problem.
Well, he is now
large scale Russian imperialism.
So he's there at the peace talks, or the talks that they're having in Belarus right now, between Ukraine and Russia. He is like facilitating them or participating in them. He's been involved in Russian politics directly. So it's interesting to see him involved in this as well.
Do you think he's had a very long political career, as well as he's owned Chelsea for about 20 years. He's done a lot of work for Israel and anti-Semitism and all over the world. Do you think anyone sort of asks for tickets as a political quid pro quo?
I'm sure they've been offered at times. I mean, it's a hot ticket. Chelsea's one of the I 5 or 6 probably famed Premier League teams, and I guess it's just like it's an interesting story. It's an interesting thing to monitor. As you said, like I can't really think of any situations where someone's had to divest from a team, and that hasn't happened yet, but it may, because of sort of geopolitical reasons. And again, it's not just he's not just like average Russian citizen who happens to be a billionaire. He is like a Putin confidant and politician.
Interestingly,
so
not with in not necessarily Jewish, but the same thing is currently happening in F1, where one of the owners and sponsors of the Haas F1 team, which is actually an American team, their biggest sponsor is the Ural Kali, which is a potash company owned by Dmitry Mazepin, another very close confidant of Putin, whose son is actually the driver of the team. Right. And the owners of the team are sort of forcing out the sponsorship right now. They used to race with the Russian flag on their car. That's not happening anymore.
It would have been interesting to see what would have happened with Mikhail Prokhorov if he still was the owner of the Brooklyn Nets. He sold the team 2 or 3 years ago, but it's an interesting thing to monitor. Joe Tsai, who's the current owner, is again someone who's connection with the Chinese Communist Party.
Yeah, a difficult government
has put his has made him not a controversy-free figure.
I have to say,
interesting looking at it from that perspective.
It's a bit of a bummer about Abramovich, in my opinion, because he, as a sort of a notable wealthy Jewish person in London, he has spent untold amounts of time and effort fighting anti-Semitism, both in sports and around the world. Chelsea, who for a long time was known as the team of the National Front Party of Britain, which for our non-British listeners is, I guess, akin to any sort of white nationalist party that you have in your country that may have actually won some seats every now and again. He banned them from the stadium as soon as he took over ownership, and hosts, global anti-Semitism conferences and spends a lot of time and effort fighting anti-Semitism. And to learn that someone like that is also, a crony of a petulant, difficult dictator who's recently had a bad facelift is not great.
On the player side of things, we have seen comments from Elina Svitolina, who has now been confirmed as having some Jewish heritage, a tennis player who's been ranked in the top 5, condemning the attacks, and obviously that's been echoed by people all over the world, both Ukrainian and not Ukrainian. Even some Russian tennis players and Russian athletes have been able to condemn what's going on in Russia because of their position outside of the country and their ability to get away with some discussion of it. So anyways, obviously interesting how politics always affects sports, and vice versa.
That's why we're here.
Yeah. One other thing I wanted to talk about was Daniel Berger at the Honda Classic.
He was so close. He had 3 weeks of such closeness.
Yeah, so he was the clubhouse leader after 36 holes and after 54 holes as well, and just really struggled on Sunday. He was 4 over when all the other leaders shot under par. He put it in the water on 18, going for it on a par 5 because he had to eagle out to tie Sepp Straka who won the tournament. So disappointing finish for one of the two really notable Jewish golfers on the PGA Tour. I still think he's got a win or two in him this season. Hopefully he's peaking as the majors start, or the Players Championship, I guess, is coming up first. But be interesting to keep an eye on Daniel Berger. I think he's going to be a good bet to win some tournaments coming up. Hopefully he can rebound from falling apart on Sunday and put up some good numbers.
Absolutely. And I think he will be soon too. So beyond Berger, beyond Berger,
that's funny.
But yeah, exactly. Oh, we should talk. Maybe we have a segment where we talk about the rest of the PGA Tour on our podcast called Beyond Berger.
Beyond Berger. Gabe, any other notable stories in the world of choosing sports this week?
I don't know if you saw lately, but we had a kippah wearing Amare Stoudemire show up to a Yeshiva University basketball game.
Right, the Skyline Conference Finals, probably the first Amare sighting at a Skyline Conference game.
I wonder if any NBA player, current or former, has ever been to a Skyline Conference game.
Ooh, good question. I'm sure someone's made it to one of those games. But Yeshiva University.
He took his friend Enos Freedom with him too.
That's right. So Yeshiva University, the Maccabees, won the Skyline Conference tournament. They have made it into the D3 NCAA tournament. It's not. I don't think it's seeded per se. There's like little clusters at different schools. So they have a match on Friday against Johns Hopkins, and then I think Saturday night, if they win, they're ranked, I think very highly. They've had a few losses now, but they've won the last several games that they played.
That's amazing. They had that loss, unfortunately. I think they're ranked 2 in the country right now.
Wow. So they've gone right back up.
Right back up. And that'll be really exciting to see them in this tournament. If they win, finally get that national championship they've been looking forward to, that would be really, really spectacular for all, I guess, Jewish people the world over. I think it's like, even if they don't win, they do get the chance to try this time. And, our listeners, I think, will remember that 2 years ago, because of COVID, their run in the 2020 tournament was stopped short just because there was no tournament. So the winning streak is over. They lost 3 games this year, but they have a chance. They have a chance to compete. They have a chance to go really far and potentially will win the whole thing. Ryan Terrell was named the player of the week in Skyline. He's probably as good a D3 player as there is. And allegedly, in addition to at that Skyline Conference Finals, Amari, apparently there were a lot of NBA scouts at that game, and rumors are abound about if and where he might sign at the end of this season or next.
Yeah. And, he could be the next Jack Sigma, talking about a D3 player who made it to the NBA. He could be the next Brad Stevens. Yeah.
I think at this point, he's going to get some run.
Yeah, definitely. So something we'll keep an eye on, and good luck to Yeshiva as they fight it out in the D3 tournament. Let's turn now to our interview with Jeff Pearlman. We're joined tonight by Jeff Pearlman. Jeff, thanks so much for joining us.
Sure, my pleasure.
Jeff, can you tell our listeners a little bit about who you are, your career, things like that?
Sure. I'm straight out of the mean streets of Mahopac, New York. I write books mainly for a living. I spent a lot of time at Sports Illustrated, the Tennessean, Newsday for a little bit, and I've written 9 books, and my 10th is coming out. And I guess one of the reasons you have me here is because one of my books called Showtime about the 80s Lakers is about to be, there's a HBO series starting shortly called Winning Time, which is based on that book. So here,
I assume they can't call it Showtime for obvious reasons.
Yeah, it's annoying. It was it's no big deal, but it was the Showtime. It was Showtime. Sort of the project was known as Showtime, and then at some point they were like, Showtime.
This is one of our big rivals, and we can't have a TV show.
I get it. It was a little bit of a bummer because the book is called Showtime, but I totally understand.
Right.
Did it ever occur to you to call it HBO Max, the story of the Los Angeles Lakers?
I was thinking more it would be really cool if it was like Jeff Pearlman presents.
Yes.
What I'm doing there.
Yeah. Yes.
Or exactly. Stars, the LA Lakers. That would have been they would have had to cancel that too. So Jeff, tell us a little bit. What's Showtime about? What are the Showtime Lakers? What was your book about? What were you looking into with that?
So it's basically 79 through 91, the Lakers, basically beginning with the Magic Johnson, Jerry Buss arrival and concluding with Magic's HIV announcement. I consider that team and those years to be arguably the most important sort of run in the NBA. When Magic Johnson and Larry Bird arrive into the league, the NBA is kind of this floundering entity. A lot of the franchises are, approaching bankruptcy. The finals in 1980 are on tape delay. It's kind of amazing. 1980 NBA finals were shown on tape delay. And it's just sort of about this transformative period. And, a lot of it is based on three guys on those teams, Magic, Kareem, and Pat Riley, and kind of the rise and the highs and lows of that whole run. So that's really what the book is about.
Right.
So I've noticed, I'm sure a lot of our listeners and readers who know about you've written more than one book about the Lakers. You've written two, exactly. Your second one, Three Ring Circus, came out 2 years ago, I believe. What is it about the Los Angeles Lakers that you find makes them so book-worthy?
I guess it's not the Lakers themselves. It's sort of those periods and the characters. Right. The reason I pitched that first book, number one, when I was growing up in New York back in the 80s, you couldn't get, you wouldn't see the Lakers that much. And when you did see them on TV, it was always like, you're in the cold, you're in New York, and they show, we're live from Inglewood, and they show the outside of the stadium, and they'll always do the shot with the palm trees, and they'll do a quick shot of the beach nearby, and then you go inside.
Like the big spotlights going.
Yeah, and it's like they show the Laker girls, and there's Jack Nicholson next to Diane Cannon, next to whoever, and then you see Magic in these cool uniforms and Kareem, and it was always it really represented to me as a kid Hollywood, Hollywood, the same way like the Los Angeles Rams helmets glistening in the sun represented Hollywood. So I always had that with me. So when you're pitching a book, number one, I'm big into nostalgia. Number two, I'm big into big characters. And with those Lakers, you had Magic, Kareem, Riley. With the other Lakers, you had Shaq, Kobe, Phil. So it didn't have to be the Lakers.
Right.
But everything kind of came together and worked as one.
It does seem like there's something magical about the characters in especially I think in Kareem and Magic Johnson, and just being these incredibly charismatic, interesting guys who, could really just hold a room in a press conference, aside altogether from the fact that they're two of the best, probably 10 basketball players of all time. I think most people would agree on that. They're just these, they're stars. Like they were stars in a different sense. And I think that's, I don't know. It seems to propel the Lakers in the public consciousness, aside from just they were good at basketball and were able to beat up on the Celtics a bunch of times.
Well, I would say it's true with Magic, not as much with Kareem. Kareem had been there a bunch of years before Magic got there. Kareem had very little charisma. He was an introvert. He was very guarded. When the Lakers would fly, which they flew commercial at that point, he would hide in a bathroom stall with a book and just sit on the toilet reading a book for 2 hours because he hated getting recognized, hated signing autographs. And Magic comes along and he's the opposite. And for me, when I think about Magic Johnson, the Lakers, there's a scene in my book, which obviously it happened, where he's in LA for the first time and he's being driven by, I think, a limousine. And he asks the driver to stop, and he gets out of the car and he picks an orange off of a tree, and he's just holding this orange, and he's like, "Oh my God, you guys grow fruit on trees out here. This is amazing." Wow. I just think, to me, that's a moment that really says what it's all about. Just the bringing together of a perfect city, perfect team, and this guy who was made for the spotlight. And
especially somebody who comes from the auto plant manufacturing world of all gray metal.
Exactly.
I would say Magic growing up in Michigan, going to Michigan State, LA is about as far from that as you can possibly get.
I would agree. And one thing I love about this show is the guy who plays Magic is a kid named Quincy Isaiah. He was he's a kid from Michigan, also played Division III college football in Michigan. And it's that same kind of thing. When I've talked to him, I'm always like, man, you are actually living the Hollywood dream. He posted the other day on Instagram a photo of him standing in front of a billboard in LA with his photo on it. And I'm like, this is awesome. The exact same thing. It's so unbelievably cool. Yeah. And he's a guy from Michigan as well.
Did you feel that ending the book in 1991, is that sort of, obviously Magic Johnson retires, came back briefly after that, but it was his retirement. Was it a sort of end of the party? Certainly the end of a Lakers era, I think. Definitely. That's fair to say.
100%. They made the finals with him against the Bulls, and then basically he's HIV positive and he stops. And the thing I don't know if it's interesting, but when I wrote the Shaq Kobe years, I actually started it with Magic's brief comeback. So it almost did feel to me a little bit like a sequel book.
Mm-hmm. That bridge there, I guess, between 93 or 94 and 97 when Kobe's drafted, or 98.
Or 96.
96.
And people forget,
who's counting?
Magic, yeah, he's counting. Magic's comeback was kind of a disaster. He came back and everyone was excited and nobody really wanted to play with him. And, he's kind of, little, it was okay, but not great.
And he had the dream team in between.
He did have the dream team, and he came back to coach briefly, and that was a disaster.
Right.
And just out of curiosity for our listeners, is this pre or post Starbucks Magic Johnson?
This is pre-Starbucks Magic Johnson.
Pre-generational wealth Magic Johnson.
Correct. But it's amazing. I don't know how old you guys are, but you're probably young for it. We all I always say this, 1991, I'm in college. Magic announces HIV positive.
Mhm.
We all just assumed he was going to go the way every public figure who had HIV at that time did, which is he loses a ton of weight. He starts getting lesions all over his face. We see him walking around with a walker, and then we hear about him dying.
Right.
We say, well, we're always this cliche. We're always going to remember him for his vibrant self. It's insane. Like when he came back the other day, when he was at the 75 greatest players, I mean, he looks better than most of those guys.
Right.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
And I've heard people talk about how for, the younger generation of basketball fans, they're not even aware of the fact that Magic Johnson is HIV positive, or that's an issue or a thing, because he's just been this sort of, jovial public figure, again, like a star always in the limelight certainly for the last 25 years.
Correct.
And, the fact that he made this huge announcement, or that, as you say, everyone thought he was going to die within a short period of time, it's totally lost from the public consciousness, which is a great, and a testament to him. And I guess the, efficacy of HIV drugs around the time that he developed HIV. So it is amazing to see that. I do have a question. I want to know, just from your perspective, you wrote this book, 7-8 years ago. What's your position in terms of how the sausage is made of a book becoming a TV show? My
position, do you mean how did it happen?
How did it happen? What was your involvement after the book was optioned, or a decision was made to turn it into a TV show? How does that all happen?
All right. So I've had books optioned multiple times, and the first time it happens to an author, he or she, you always think, wow, I'm going to have a book made into a TV show. I'm going to have a book made into a movie. This is unbelievable. And you tell your friends, and holy cow. And then it doesn't happen. And then you have another one option, and it doesn't happen. And the thing is, there's so much BS flying around that business, Hollywood. And everyone tells you, I always say this now, like somebody is always somebody else's uncle's, cousin's, brother's, nephew's friend with Halle Berry, or, Tom Hanks. I know Tom Hanks is publicist, and I'm going to get it to him. And it's just nonsense. So the book came out.
Well, you know who runs Hollywood, don't you? We're allowed to make that joke, by the way.
I do.
Yeah, you do. Yeah. You're the guy. Guy.
Our people run Hollywood. It's so true. So basically, it all happened because I'm Jewish. That's why it happened. I just had this card. They said, "Are you Jewish?" And I said, "Yes." They said, "Can you prove it?" I said, "Here's my bar mitzvah invitation." They said,
and the earlier book, that was just a misunderstanding. What you should have told us.
Exactly.
Why didn't you? Exactly.
That's funny. So what is funny though, I will tell you this. So 2014 book comes out. There's a screenwriter named Jim Hecht, who's kind of he's struggling, and he did an Ice Age movie, and he's written scripts, and he's talented, but it's a struggle. And he comes to my house. He's Jewish as well, on Easter Sunday, 2014, because 2 Jews on Easter. What are you going to do?
Sure.
And he wants to buy the rights, get the rights to this book I wrote. And he shows up, and I think he went through Grand Central Station to get to my house in New Rochelle, New York at the time. And he has with him a block of chocolate wrapped in saran wrap, a tomato, and a bottle of wine drink, not wine drink. And we're like, what the hell is this? What is this? But he didn't know what to bring, and he had to bring something because he's come to dinner. It's Easter Sunday, but not much is open. He shows up, and I'm very skeptical. And he's like, well, I love this book, and blah, 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 and it'd be great, and blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, all right, fine. And I gave him the rights to it, which I shouldn't have done. I gave it to him for no money, which is a mistake, but it worked out here. And through the years, he would always be like, it's going to happen. And I'm always like, it's never going to happen. No, it's going to happen. It's never going to happen. We'd have meetings with people. It's going to be great. It doesn't happen. And then a few years ago, he's like, Adam McKay wants us to come to his house. And do you guys know who Adam McKay is?
Yeah. So he's a writer director. He's done a few movies now, Big Short.
Correct.
And Vice recently, Don't Look Up, that's just got nominated. And he developed Succession too.
Correct. He's kind of big time. And I didn't know who he was. I had no idea. So he's like, Adam McKay wants us to come to his house. I'm like, all right. I show up at the house, standing outside the house, Googling Adam McKay. Oh, wow.
He's the Ricky Bobby guy.
Yeah, exactly. Well done. I go to his house with Jim Hecht, and he's cool. We talk. He likes basketball. We talk sports. It's great. I'm still skeptical. HBO sends me contracts. All right. I sign them. I'm still skeptical. And then one day, like the Hollywood Reporter put out an article about the casting for the show. And it was like John C. Reilly and Sally Field or something cast in this new show based off of Jeff Pearlman's book. And I'm like, holy crap. That's my dog, by the way. I'm like, holy crap, this is really? And people started emailing me. Did you see this in the Hollywood Reporter? And I'm like, I don't know. And then it just started going fast.
And no one had talked to you between the contract signing and this article?
No.
Wow.
Maybe Jim had said to me, I think it's going to happen or something. But one day someone emailed me this article and I was like, wow. and it's insane. And that's
amazing. So it just, it just sort of takes on a life of its own, or doesn't, I guess, in the ones that didn't get developed into TV shows. But
yeah. And the thing is, like, this is the thing I always say is important. People are like, wow, congratulations. And wow, this is amazing. And wow, the success. And wow, all this, right? And I'm always like, and I really mean this isn't like fake humility. Like, I just wrote the book. Like, I just wrote the book. People like the actor who played Michael Cooper, Delonte D'Souza, great guy. He's like, I was on the set and he's like, do you ever look around and think like all this wouldn't happen if it weren't for you? And it's like, it's kind of accidental. Like I just wrote the book, and someone, luckily Jim Hecht, it's really Jim Hecht's baby. Like, he's the one who had the brainchild. This should be a TV show. But I'm still going to I'm going to a premiere in a couple of days, and it's the coolest thing ever.
That's amazing.
That's great. And have you watched? Have you been able to see any of the episodes?
Seen all of them.
Oh, you've seen all of them. That's great. We should note for podcast purposes, there are two prominent, at least Jewish actors in it. Jason Segal's playing Paul Westhead, and Adrien Brody, of course, as Pat Riley. Interesting casting choice, but
Adrien Brody Jewish?
Yeah, absolutely.
Didn't even know.
Big time. And I mean, because it's our responsibility to know these things. Of the Jewish characters, there's Red Auerbach, and that was about it. Are there any that we missed?
I assume is Don Sterling in the show at some point? I would think he would play in at some point. He is. But I saw Michael Chiklis playing Red Auerbach. I'm looking forward to that. Should be fun to watch. Not Jewish, but Red Auerbach, of course, the great Jewish basketball coach.
That's funny.
So it's really exciting. I think I'm really excited to see it. It has at least from what I've seen from the trailer, it has a real like of the era vibe in terms of how it was shot and the colors and I don't know, the vibe of it all. So I'm really looking forward to that. It looks like a fun chill is what I get from the show.
It's really fun, and I'm obviously biased because but it's freaking great. But can I talk about my bar mitzvah with you guys?
Yeah, absolutely. That's
this is the place
skipping
to talk
ahead
about
like
your bar
6
mitzvah.
questions, but yeah, of course.
I want your opinion on my bar mitzvah.
Okay,
I'm being sincere. I have a debate with my mom that's ongoing, and she will hate that I bring this up, but she probably won't hear it, and that's okay. So that's why I'm going to do it.
Yeah.
1985, Mount Kisco Holiday Inn, Mount Kisco, New York. Bar mitzvah. Okay, I'm Reformed Jew.
Yeah.
So the service and the service is held in one room of the Mount Kisco Holiday Inn. Then the aftermath. Okay. My mom sends out 2 different invitations to people.
Okay.
One is just for a cocktail hour in the bar of the Mount Kisco Holiday Inn. The other is for the cocktail hour and the reception, the major, the ballroom reception, also in the Mount Kisco Holiday Inn. The bar mitzvah happens and people come. The people who are only invited to part 1 don't know that there's a part 2.
Right.
Like, they're invited to a cocktail reception. So then you have 70% of the people going off to the major ballroom, and 30% have to just go home. I say that is in horrible taste, and that someone out there still remembers that.
Yes.
My mom disagrees. What says you guys?
I would say, so I think it depends. I think the thing we're not considering here is how adept is the event staff at the Mount Kisco Holiday Inn? Not, especially the bar mitzvah staff.
It's a bit of a DIY bar mitzvah.
Also,
Holiday Inn.
I would say I grew up in a very not Jewish town. So like a lot of the guests wouldn't even know how these things work. So I think a lot of guests probably just assumed, oh, the cocktail reception is what's happening with the bar mitzvah.
Yeah.
And wouldn't even know there's this big party until they see everyone going to the big party.
So did you have any gate crashers?
No, but I remember Jimmy McDonald, who grew up the street from me, saying to his mom, wait, we can't go to the party. And his mom having to explain to him, which blows a million times over.
Yeah.
So I think the problem is not in the separation so much as the execution, because I know that people do this often, for example, like at a wedding or something like that, where it's like they'll invite people to come for dessert, and it's like you don't come for the first several hours.
Wait,
well,
what?
it's like, so this is something I've heard. It's like they're not given a seat and a dinner, but it's like come at 10. Often people will do it with like their siblings' friends, the bride's siblings' friends or something like that. Where
like
it's
if
like
there's a band and drinks.
We want you to have fun.
Yeah,
we want people to be there and party and dance. Show up at 9:00, and you won't have a table and dessert or whatever, but there'll be snacks and drinks and stuff like that. So come for that. And then it works because everybody's there, and then more people come in later.
I just want to interject really quickly that I would kill to go to a wedding where dinner was over at 9:00.
That's fair.
Yeah.
But here's my question for you, Gabe. Would you have to bring a gift if you're only invited to dance and have cake?
Less of a gift.
Less of a gift. Still a
so
gift.
Like $30 gift card to Target kind of gift.
Sure. That would be hard. We're in Canada, so that would be especially cruel because Target went out of business here like 5 years ago. But still, yeah. No, a slightly lesser gift. But I think your mom's like, her heart was in the right place of like they're needing to be or wanting to have that separation or needing that because of capacity issues or whatever it was. But it's tricky to tell people, hey, sorry, it's 8:00 or 7:30.
So, did you grow up in Mount Kisco?
No, I grew up in Mahopac, which is a tiny town about 20 minutes away.
Unfortunately, this is a visual medium. This isn't a visual medium, but you are wearing a New York Mets hat right now.
That's because it's a hat. I'm not a fan of any team.
Oh, okay. Is that just the sports writer neutrality of not being a fan of anyone?
Correct.
Correct.
Well, is anyone really proud to be a Mets fan? Like, I feel like anytime I have a Mets t-shirt and anytime somebody says, I go like, sort of.
I don't know. I think people like the resiliency of being a Met fan. It's kind of like being a Jet fan, which I grew up as, which is like someone would be like, why don't you just root for the Giants? And your answer is like, I'm a Jet fan. You can't do it.
Yeah, we have the Maple Leafs. It's the same thing. People ask you, why don't you do literally anything else?
You have John Tavares on your team.
Yeah, that's true. As a New York guy, you would know that.
No. Well, talking about New York, Jeff, one thing we did want to touch base with you on is a famous interview you did with John Rocker about 2 decades ago now.
Not a Jew. No, not a big fan of them either, from what I understand.
Yeah, I was gonna say your interview with him originally. I mean, he had some very racist and I don't know, homophobic things to say. Certainly, I don't know if he said anything anti-Semitic at that time. At least nothing that was printed. I think since he's said things that are pretty anti-Semitic here or there, but he's been much less relevant since you wrote that article, I guess. So, or coincidentally, vanished. He is pretty much vanished.
He was selling. You'd be happy to know, in case you're looking for one. He was selling Speak English t-shirts for a while on his website. So if you want to just Speak English t-shirt, go to johnrocker.com.
Did he lose the Let's Go Brandon rights somehow?
Yeah, exactly. He wasn't in on that at the ground floor. Big mistake.
But what's it like interviewing someone who I'm going to assume you found a little personally odious, or at least the things he said a little odious. What's it like doing an interview with somebody like that? Like, especially when it's going to be a sort of profile piece for a magazine.
My guess is you look interested and slide the tape recorder slightly closer.
It's interesting. You kind of wear multiple hats in this business. And the truth of the matter is, when someone opens up to you, even if you find them objectionable, your goal is to just listen. And I think people who start arguing or debating make a mistake. Now, you can't egg them on. You can't do that. I couldn't be like, if John Rocker's complaining about foreigners, I certainly couldn't say, yeah, those foreigners do suck. Like, that's, obviously you can't egg them on.
Of course.
But you can listen and listen and listen. And I've never found that difficult. I've interviewed many people who've said things I don't agree with. I've interviewed many people of different political persuasions in mind, et cetera, et cetera. You kind of just learn self-control. And later on, you can complain about when you're back home. I always thought it was interesting. He just thought we were two white guys in a car. I've always been that. Like, that was his thing. We're just two white guys in a car. We're talking. It's cool, bruh. That whole thing. He was just kind of a meathead.
Do you feel like there are things like that, like what he said in that interview? Do you think those things are said and not published by reporters?
Oh yeah, of course. Many times I had reporters after that came out saying you really took advantage of him and that you should have said to him, are you sure you want this in public? And my sort of thing, I always said, like, I wasn't going after him, but I'm not in the business of protecting racists. And I had a tape recorder running and I had a notebook out. Like, he knew why I was, and I said, hi, I'm Jeff from Sports Illustrated. Like,
yeah. Right. It wasn't a gotcha interview. It was, hi, I'm Jeff from Sports Illustrated. Of course, everything you said would be on the record.
I want to bring this back a little bit to the Jewish context. I think your comment about two white guys in a car makes a lot of sense. Something that, a few months ago, we had Cody Decker on the show.
One of my favorite people.
Yeah. Wonderful.
I love Cody.
He was great.
And he told the story. His perspective was that baseball is so Christian that it doesn't even occur to anyone that there would be a Jewish person in the room. Like, it's just not on anyone's radar. So the same way it's just two white guys talking in a car, it's just 23 guys praying.
Yes, he's 100% correct. It's actually really interesting. The impact and role of diehard Christianity in sports is no joke, and especially in baseball.
Right.
And when I was growing up in my small little town with very few Jews, you would get the questions. We even had, like, do you have horns on your head? Like, that kind of craziness. People throw pennies at us, my brother and I, different things. You don't celebrate Christmas? No. Well, so what about Santa? And in modern day baseball, it's still a thing. There's still a big evangelical role. Baseball is by far the most conservative and least enlightened sport I covered.
Interesting.
And what do you think the most is?
NBA by far.
Yeah. I did like that anecdote. I really like that anecdote in your book about Kareem meeting Ronald Reagan and telling him something like, nice to meet you. I disagree with everything you've ever done in all your politics.
I do too. I love Kareem. I mean, Kareem,
I can really imagine Kareem doing that. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, Kareem is a tough guy. He's not. Yeah, but he's got opinions, and he's really emerged as kind of a thought leader in modern times.
Oh yeah,
liberal.
And real voice against anti-Semitism. He's like written multiple times about when there's been anti-Semitic incidents. I think when Stephen Jackson was, I can't write, it's so hard to remember exactly what the details were, but he supported somebody else in terms of saying some anti-Semitic things. Anyways, but he really,
I think he
is a supporter of the Jews, I guess.
He's down
just
with
for the record. Stephen Jackson went on a podium and suggested everyone in the audience research the Rothschilds to see what's really going on.
Oh boy,
that was the scandal.
Yeah, it's
he actually meant former Tampa Bay manager Larry Rothschild. So.
Yeah, that's right. Yankee CH Larry Rothschild. That was the guy he was talking
maybe
about.
He was just talking about the wine.
It could be.
Yeah, that's right. Research it. It's Premier Crew Bordeaux. You guys got to get into this. They do say NBA players more and more into wine these days.
Really? That's interesting.
Yeah, there's a big article about it a couple years ago. LeBron's a big wine guy.
Yeah, I am not. Yeah.
Couple of questions for you. We don't need to take your whole evening, but
okay.
We're having fun. And I wanted to ask you, you mentioned a lot of your other books. You've written 9 books. Some of them have been optioned. If you were to take any other one and envision a movie, TV show adaptation, what's your top, what was the most thing you'd like to see put on screen?
I would say I wrote a biography of Walter Payton, and it was the most emotionally gratifying and difficult book I've ever written. But also the book really chronicles his rise from poor Columbia, Mississippi, to the Chicago Bears, to this battle with this horrible disease, and ultimately dying of cancer at a very young age. And it has this really interesting arc that I find fascinating. And I find him really heroic, but flawed. And the problem is that I've run into when I talk to about people is sports movies tend to be a hard sell more than you would think, especially nowadays, because these companies are really concerned with international audiences, and there's no international audience for an NFL player. You can maybe baseball, definitely basketball more than used to, but the NFL has not much international appeal. So a Walter Payton movie might do great in America, but it would die on the vine in China.
That's really interesting.
And was he as good of a guy as everyone says?
Yeah, but he was very flawed. But he was, yeah. The funny thing about that, I remember when I first interviewed his brother, Eddie, who now kind of hates me. And I said, I was like, I just read Walter Payton's autobiography. He wrote a book called Never Die Easy. And I said, is your brother as great as he just seems, like such a great guy? He said something like, you know what? Nobody's that great. And it's actually true. Nobody's that great. We all have flaws. We all have warts. We all have problems. So yeah, he was a great guy, but he also was he cheated on his wife, and he was a hit or miss dad in some areas. And, he had his flaws like we all do.
That's it. I mean, that's great. I mean, not great, but that's it. I think that's a really interesting answer.
Yeah, I would love to see a movie about Walter Payton. He's definitely a guy who I know about, but obviously I didn't watch him play. And
if you guys can put together, I don't know, like we don't need more than $5 million to make this thing. So if you guys can, you're Jewish and you work in Hollywood, obviously, because you are.
Yeah, we know a few guys. Exactly. Yeah, right. I did want to point out the irony that, as a Jewish person, you've had all these movies options. Now all these shows options. Now you get one that might be the least Jewish story of anything you could have done.
True. But Magic Johnson has the heart of a Jew.
Is that right? He definitely tweets like an old Jewish person.
He totally does.
Without total understanding of the media.
I am very confident that Magic Johnson has been to more than one bar mitzvah.
Oh, absolutely.
For sure. No question. Like I mean, now that he's involved with the Dodgers, like he probably hangs out with Sandy Koufax just to absorb.
Sure. Exactly. Or Sean Green, who, by the way, I'm having lunch with in 2 weeks.
Oh, no way.
Oh, fantastic. We're always good for some Sean Green content on this podcast. You're like our 4th or 5th interview in a row where Sean Green has come up.
Sean Green, I covered Sean when he was in baseball, and I always really liked the guy. And now he lives not that far away from me, and he came to speak to a few of my classes. And
oh, that's great.
We're kind of friends, which is kind of weird. And
that's amazing.
I said to my wife today, I said, there's a great script to be written about a writer and a former ball player becoming friends after the ball player's career is over, and they're a little weird,
especially if they're Jewish,
even better. Yeah,
we might only need $4 million for that one.
That's true. Well, Sean has the money. What does that, Sean?
Yeah,
well, Jeff, you could be the one to write that. I mean, your foot is in the door of Hollywood, or the door is wide open now. So
wide open. People are calling me out every day.
That we used to, I don't know if you know, in Toronto when Sean Green, like amongst Jewish kids, like it was almost like legend that he would show up at your synagogue. Like, oh, like Sean Green showed up at Yom Kippur this year. No, he came to my synagogue at Rosh Hashanah last year.
Yeah, I met him at my summer camp last year. Oh, he came and spoke to my school. He was really like, everybody had a Sean Green story. I'm sure most of them are true.
Because somebody asked me recently, someone was like, when you were growing up and you're Jewish, did it matter to you if like the player wasn't born Jewish? Like they would use Rod Crew, who actually isn't Jewish, but they'd use his example.
Yes.
Like, did it bother you that he wasn't born Jewish? And my answer was, hell no. We will take anyone. Elliot Maddox, come on over. Anyone, as long as you're even close to, if you're married to Jewish, I'm totally happy.
Right, exactly. Well, we're having a Mensch Madness next month to try to pick the greatest Jewish athlete of all time, and one of the people on that list is Amari Stoudemire. So he will be
If you have a final four of greatest Jewish athletes of all time,
let's hear yours.
It's got to be Koufax, obviously.
Yeah.
It's got to be Greenberg, obviously.
It's
probably got to be Max Baer.
So, okay, we went with Barney Ross instead of Max Baer.
All right, that's not bad. And then Dolph Schayes.
So Dolph Schayes is on the list. The two big ones that you're missing, I think, are Mark Spitz and Dara Torres, both swimmers who were sort of
Sue Bird,
pretty dominant. And
Sue Bird is our number one seed.
Yeah. Oh, Sue Bird's the number one seed.
Yeah.
Sue Bird's the number one seed over Sandy Koufax.
They're both number one.
The two.
Oh, I see.
We've got a whole bracket system here.
Yeah.
But isn't this a little bit like you have a Final Four and like one team is coming out of the ACC undefeated and you know they're going to win the national championship? Isn't that Koufax?
Yes. So
Koufax is Koufax.
We had a long debate over we'll get to this question with you because we only got a few minutes left, but we have to ask, when we ask who your favorite Jewish athlete is of all your guests, we have to like quantify like, oh, when you were a kid, because if you say overall, the answer is always Koufax.
Right. Oh, so you asked me my favorite Jewish athlete?
Yes. When you were a kid, who mattered to you in the 80s in New York?
Well, my number one favorite Jewish athlete, even though it turns out he wasn't Jewish, was Rod Carew.
Right.
Far. And I loved Rod Carew as a kid. Like loved Rod Carew, and he wore the tie. And I was all about Rod Carew. Like I loved Rod Carew. I really did.
Did you think he was Jewish at the time?
Of course I did. Of course I did.
It's funny because, and I understand why everyone thinks he's Jewish, or he had a Jewish wife, his kids are Jewish, but someone who doesn't get brought up, who actually did convert after their playing years, was Patriots linebacker Andre Tippett, and he has like fully converted to Judaism. He was like a pretty good player. He was
he was a great player.
Yeah, like he was a great player. I guess as a Jets fan, you would have watched him when you were a kid.
He was like Lawrence Taylor Light back in the day. He really was.
And it's just like he isn't so much in the public consciousness or anything like that, but like married a Jewish woman, converted to Judaism. So someone who should be celebrated in the same voice as Rod Carew.
Yeah, that's
as a convert. Yeah,
I remember when I was a kid, my parents bought me a book like The Greatest Jewish Athletes. I know there's a joke; it's a pamphlet, but it was actually like 200 pages, and it was like I remember like Steve Ratzer was like a picture of the Montreal Expos. And like I was reading. They bought me that for Hanukkah one year, and I was like all about this book.
And then the last thing, I just want to say my dad would kill me if I didn't say this. I think so. He grew up in Jamaica, Queens, and now lives in Toronto. Moved to Toronto years ago, but I think he reads The Bad Guys 1 almost yearly. Wow. Just to sort of like relive that time in his life. When he had to see a doctor, he like going to Ron Taylor. Like he's like that kind of Mets fan.
Number one, I don't know if he saw this, but you're actually supposed to pay me $20 every time you read the book.
Oh,
kind of weird. I haven't gotten a check from him.
I'll text him.
And number two, please tell him I appreciate that. That's really flattering. It's
it's
a one book I've written that actually seems to have a little bit of a cult following among like Met fans seem to know that book better than my other books are known by fan bases.
Yeah.
Well, hopefully the Mets will win another World Series. So Jeff, you can write another book about it, and Gabe's dad will have something else to read.
There you go.
I'd love to read it. I mean, I'm looking forward to any sort of Subway series book that is not bad.
Maybe.
Well, I was 11. Anyway.
Yeah. Anyways, Jeff, we should wrap it up there. Thanks for being so generous with your time and joining us. Everybody can watch Showtime. It's coming out, I think, next Sunday. So that'll be March 6th. And it's coming on HBO Max, I think. And it looks really great. I'm really excited to watch it.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me on. I appreciate it.
We'll really big thanks to Jeff Pearlman for joining us. You can catch Showtime on HBO Max right after, or if you're in Canada on Crave, after this Sunday, which is March 6th. Showtime was the name of the book. The name of the show, I believe, is Winning Time. So you get Winning Time at the end of this weekend.
Really funny, as we discussed, to write a book with the same name as a rival network. Yeah, it's like NBC would never put out a show about the alphabet called ABC, even for children.
Maybe. Well, anyway, Thanks to Jeff. As he mentioned earlier, he's also got a new book coming out this year, which is about Joe Baxson, famous both football and baseball player Joe Baxson. No, that's Bo Jackson I'm here to talk about. That's Jeff's new book about Bo Jackson, which we're all excited to read. Thanks for that. And that will just about do it for our show this week.
As always, you can find us on the Canadian Jewish News. That's at the CJN.ca. You can find their Facebook page, the CJN Lounge, obviously on Facebook. You can please listen to, like, and subscribe to this podcast wherever you get your podcasts, any podcast player you got. Always good to get subscriptions, comments, anything you got. And you can follow us on Twitter at Menschwarmers. Oh, we should also plug, Gabe, in terms of social plugs. We should plug Menschwarmers TikTok, which now has one video.
It has one video made wonderfully by Jamie about Unca Jams.
Yeah, so we are branching out to a new medium. We are not very good at it because we are both, medium to old millennials,
elder
millennials, and we are not as keen on the new technology. But hopefully, we'll continue to do the odd TikTok here and there. And check it out for our list of the top 5 Jewish gambling movies.
If we ever find a way to reanimate the dead, I'd love to talk to Paul Newman.
Well, we'll leave it there. Until next time, thanks for joining us.